Husker fans, Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald and Husker Extra. This is our basketball update for early May. We'll talk almost exclusively men's basketball. We might hit a little women's basketball here at the end as well. Okay, so we come to you on May 3rd. This is just after the commit of two more transfers. Euless, who was an Iowa guard for 3 seasons, and Josiah Alec, who is coming from New Mexico but played 3 seasons before his 1 season at New Mexico at Missouri, Kansas City. Josiah is the older brother of Becca Alec, who is the middle blocker for the Nebraska volleyball team. Josiah was a Lincoln North Star grad, and he's a pretty darn good front court pickup when you think about it. When he was at New Mexico last year, he had a pretty nice season, right? So he's one of the top guys in the Mountain West in rebounds. They didn't necessarily need him to score a lot, so he only scored about 8 points a game, but there were times when he could score more than that. Certainly, he had 17 against SMU. He had a really good game in some other circumstances as well in the Mountain West. And so this is a guy that's helped them quite a bit. Had a good game against St. Mary's, 11-7 in that game. This is a guy that's kind of a glue guy. He'll do all the dirty work. He'll run the floor. He'll get the tough rebound. He's got a good frame, 6'8", 240, has the right size. I think he'll fit in well in the Big Ten. And I think he's a pretty darn good addition. Again, I think this is a guy that can come in, probably not going to score 20 points a game with any frequency, but he can run the floor for you. He might even be a starter. Not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but does have that range. You can't just ignore him out there. This is a guy that could come in and maybe score 10 points a game and get you 6 rebounds a game. I think Nebraska has added these kind of players in the past, and they've usually done pretty well with him. And I think Alec will be pretty darn motivated, much like Sam Griesel was last year, to have one very good season inside Pinnacle Bank Arena. He hasn't played in there in a while, so I suspect that he will come in and be a really good addition in that front court. Remember what they've got there right now. Rink Mass, the guy they signed from Bradley, he's the center, so to speak. Then you've got Blaise Keita and Wilhelm Breidenbach. They're currently on the team as well. If it's those 4 guys, I dare I say they might be a little bit. They might even be a little bit better than last year in the front court. And that's not a knock on Derek Walker, who was terrific. But I think Rink Mass can probably account for, 75% of what Walker did. And Josiah Alec is far better than Oleg Kohenets. I mean, that's just a reality. He's played a lot more basketball. I think he's going to be a really effective player. So I think they could be better in the front court because of those additions. Now, in the back court, Euless is now the latest commit. He's from Iowa. He was a starter at Iowa last year. He's a defensive guy. He can play a little bit of defense. He's not necessarily a big-time scorer. Career 31% three-point shooter. Doesn't mean that he's a bad three-point shooter. Again, you can't ignore him. He's not 24%. But he's not an elite three-point shooter. Interesting form, right? Bends his knee pretty well, gets the elbows out when he shoots. It's a little bit different form than you're going to see. The release isn't the quickest that I've ever seen. Physical guy, 6'3", 190, can play physical defense, can absorb contact from defenders. Tough guy who I think will play the minutes needed. Simultaneously, I wouldn't describe him again as similar to some of the players that Nebraska was pursuing. So Kirk Kriisa, who's a really good three-point shooter, a dynamic passer. I don't think Euless is that. I don't think he's Javian McCollum. I don't think he's necessarily Latrell Wrightsell, although their games are somewhat more similar. And I don't think he's Hunter Salas. Salas has a huge upside we don't know a ton about. I think who Euless is exactly what he is. Like, Nebraska knows what he is. They've faced him 5 times over the last 3 seasons, so they have a pretty good idea of what they're getting. I don't necessarily envision him being a 15-point-a-game guy. If he got to 8, 9 points a game, that would be, I think, a pretty good addition. You can slot him next to Jamarcus Lawrence, who I think stock is going up, and then I think you can also slot him next to Keisei Tobanaga. His stock's going up as well, and I think that's a pretty good trio. And if you want to bring Bryce Williams into the starting lineup, then you can try to figure out some other things. Of course, Williams being the guy they signed from Charlotte. So that'll be an interesting addition. Nebraska now has 4 transfers. They have 1 scholarship left, presuming that no one else leaves. So you did have Karan McPherson leave, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, but otherwise they haven't had anybody leave at this point. So that's where Nebraska basketball is. Remember, they've got a summer trip coming up, I believe, to Spain or Italy, one of the two. I think it's Spain that they're going to, and so they'll have a summer trip where they can kind of gel a little bit together. The Nebraska women's basketball team Yep, they haven't done a ton other than add, Montana State transfer Darian White, who I think is a pretty good transfer. I think she'll be really helpful to them on defense, and then I think she can also get to the rim. She's not a three-point shooter, but I'm not sure Nebraska needed a three-point shooter as badly as they need somebody who can basically provide them with somebody who can get to the rim. And it's kind of like a run game in football. If you can get to the rim over and over and over again, you wear your opponent down, and then that opens up some of those three-pointers, and I think Darian White is supposed to do that. Both programs are out offering kids for future recruiting classes. That's a lot of what happens during this particular period, and then you see that happen again in July. There'll be a lull in there somewhere. We'll see what Nebraska's men and women are able to do on the recruiting trail pretty soon. All right, that is our May basketball update for Nebraska basketball. Thanks, Husker fans.